right, let this room clear out. Appreciate the Precious Metals Summit. It's always a good conference here at Beaver Creek, and thanks, Tamara, for the introduction. Jason's presentation is very good. We're also in Mexico. We're in the process of almost completing our build of our Terronera project, which is an underground epithermal vein system similar to our other assets in Mexico, where we've been operating now for 18 years. And it is difficult. I know the gentleman's question for Jason, it's difficult to be on time. There's not a lot of experience in our space for mines being on time and relatively on budget, and we expect to be one of those mines that are going to be on time and budget here in Q4 2024. It'll take a little bit of time to ramp up next year, but we're excited where we're at. So I will be making forward-looking statements. We have our cautionary note, as everybody does. We are a mid-tier silver producer. Our peer group is small. A lot of our silver peers have picked up gold assets over the years. And revenue mix is generally in our space is below 50% of primary silver producers actually produce over 50% of their revenue in silver. We are 60% silver, 40% gold. That's with our existing assets that we've been operating at 18 and 17 years respectively in Mexico. The asset that we're bringing on, the Terronera project, is also 60% silver and 40% gold. So we're keeping our leading silver leverage. The mines that we have right now operating are considered high-cost mines, so we have great leverage into our share price. With silver going from $22 to $30 this year, we've had phenomenal growth in our share price, and that's in the history of Endeavour and the volatility we have with our assets and ultimately our costs. But that's changing with Terronera coming online for next year. This year we guided 8.8 million silver equivalent ounces is a high range. We changed that and revised it down in August because of a trunnion failure at Guanaceví. So we're only going to be able to produce at half capacity for about 15 weeks at Guanaceví, and we put that through in our guidance for the year of 7.3 to 7.6. That's coming after 2 years where we beat guidance. Ultimately, our cash costs at the beginning of the year, our all-in sustaining costs, was expected to be about $22 to $23. We pulled that guidance in August with the trunnion failure and obviously operating at half capacity. But we are in great position to complete our Terronera build. We had over $68 million of cash as of June 30th. We had $60 million available on our credit facility to finish building out the Terronera project, which had about $66 million left to spend at June 30th. So this year we'll produce about 4.5 million ounces of silver, 37,000 ounces of gold, spend about $30 million on the existing operations for sustaining capital, and we have an exploration budget of $8.7 million. Most of that's being spent on Pitarrilla, which I'll touch on later in the presentation, but ultimately one of the few growth assets in our peer space, something that we want to bring along after our Terronera project. We had a very strong start to the year before our trunnion failure. As I say, we were on track to do about 8.8 million silver equivalent ounces. We did 4.4 through the first half of the year. We had revenue of $122 million and operating earnings of over $22 million. Our Terronera construction was about 66% complete at June 30th. Obviously, if we're going into commissioning in Q4 2024, we don't expect commissioning to be at 100% completion. We have a number of pathways and items that won't be complete until commercial production, including the level that we embank our tailings dam, an LNG plant where we have diesel gensets to start on a temporary basis. But we are well along at June 30th and continue to have good momentum and rhythm here in Q3. And then again, recent developments is our trunnion failure at Guanaceví. That's going to require us to run at 500 tons per day as opposed to 1,200 tons per day, which we typically run for the last 10 years. The trunnion impact is about $500,000 to replace that trunnion, but the real impact is the downtime of 15 weeks. The Guanaceví mine, which is our main asset, it produces about 66% of our production. It's 80% silver, 20% gold. We've been operating here 18 years with no longer than a 2-year reserve life. In 2019, we acquired ground called El Curso. It's owned by Mr. Slim, Carlos Slim, wealthiest man in Mexico. We have a sliding scale royalty at Guanaceví that make this a high-cost asset. It's about a $5 royalty, 16% royalty off the top line. does make us good cash flow at these prices. We do about $30 million of after-tax cash flow at full capacity. And to continue on, we expect to be here for a number of years going forward. There's a longitudinal section of the discovery that we made at El Curso. That's where our existing mining operations are occurring. We own the Malache mine outright. We can continue to mine there. We continue to have exploration potential to the northwest. We are right now trying to connect from the southeast, which was the Porvenir Dos mine, where we made a discovery yesterday, to continue that deposit on, and trying to connect basically that gap you see on the right-hand side of the slide to continue to mine here for numbers of years beyond where we are today. The other asset we built the company on is the Bolañitos mine. It's 80% gold now, 20% silver. It's the little engine that could. We've always had 2 years reserve, made significant cash flow in the early part of the 2010 to 2015. At this point in time, it makes about $12 to $15 million of cash flow at today's prices. It's predominantly gold, and we see about 2 to 3 years of reserve life here and potential beyond that. But what everybody's ultimately looking at from Endeavour, and 80% of the value of our share price, is the Terronera project. We made the discovery in 2013. In 2023 of April, we announced the construction. It was a 21-month construction period. We remain on time, and we remain on what we expect to be budget of $271 million. We did finance $120 million with project loan finance at SOFR plus 3.75. As I say, we pulled $60 million of that 120 as of June 30th, and we expect to pull the last $60 million in the back half of this year. Life of mine here is 10 years of reserve life. We have over 96 million silver equivalent ounces defined. What Terronera will do for Endeavour is it will double our production and cut our cost profile in half. So here at Terronera, all the gold production, which is about 35,000 ounces of gold over that 10-year mine life, will pay for all the costs and the sustaining capital, and ultimately the silver will come for free. So our cash costs are negative. Our all-in sustaining costs at these prices are also negative. It puts us in one of the lowest quartiles from a cash cost perspective and in the lowest decile from an all-in sustaining cost perspective. At June 30th, we had spent $205 million of the $271 million. At the end of Q3, we expect to cut that in half and ultimately put in commissioning for Q4 2024. Our management team's done a phenomenal job. Don Gray, some of you in the room would know Don. He joined us in 2020. He has been leading the build for the Terronera project. He brought his team from the Buritica mine in Colombia that he finished building right before COVID hit. And prior to that, he was in Guatemala building the Escobal mine. We've done a very good job. Our social impact in the surrounding areas, there's 5 towns that impacted around Terronera. We've done a economic social impact assessment that's gone very well. We have a great social license to be able to operate in the area. We've done lots for the communities with regards to education and transportation, and we continue to see that continue. Our commissioning, as I say, is planned for Q4 of this year, so we're coming down to the final parts. All the equipment's on site. It just comes down to productivity for the next 3 to 4 months. So we're not waiting anything overseas. Our ball mill, our SAG mill, our verti mill is all in sight. Our crushing facility is basically complete. Grinding goes into pre-commissioning shortly. Flotation, we're waiting on a couple little parts. And now the main part for Terronera that we're expecting to get complete over the next 2 months is a dry stack filter plant and our concentrator loader that ultimately will get put into our tailings dam. So we're in great shape, like I say, to be going into commissioning for Q4 2024. So not a lot of examples in our space of mines being on time and relatively on budget, and I think we're going to be there with Terronera. So that's a fantastic story with regards to Terronera, just some pictures. Ultimately, we expect to be at Terronera 15, 20, 25 years before it's all said and done. It's similar to Guanaceví and Bolañitos in the fact that it's epithermal vein system. I guess what's different is the Terronera vein itself is 5.5 meters thick. We have a 10-year reserve life, where the other assets we have no longer than a 2-year reserve life. Our highest grade material is that magenta. It's at the base. It's not that the resource ends. That's just where our drilling ends. So ultimately, as we develop into Terronera, we're shooting for that lower magenta area. and we expect to drill below that with expectations and high confidence that that area will continue to depth. We also have exploration potential along strike. And then we have the La Luz vein, which is in our mine plan. It's a high-grade gold vein. It's about 1.5 meters to 2 meters thick. Not the same strike length, but it's also open to depth and along strike. We control over 20,000 hectares at Terronera. We've identified over 50 veins. We've drilled about 12 of those veins beyond Terronera and La Luz. 4 or 5 of those veins have high mineralization, between 400 grams to a kilo. So as we get into operations, we'll turn on the rigs again and try to build out a resource for Terronera to ultimately be there, as I say, 15, 20, 25 years before it's all said and done. So we're extremely excited how this transforms our company. Again, doubles our production, takes us to about 15 million ounces of silver equivalent, and cuts our cost profile in half. Behind that, we have a project called Pitarrilla. We picked up Pitarrilla in 2022 for $70 million from SSR Mining. This is an asset a lot of people in the space understand as an open pit, 30,000 tons per day, $800 million build costs with a NAV value of 1.2. SSR put that feasibility study out in 2012. We've been looking at this project as an underground operation. That's what we know. That's what we do in Mexico. It's in the state of Durango. It's about 3 hours away from Guanaceví. They invested $145 million into this project. 225,000 meters were drilled. It's one of the world's largest undeveloped silver deposits, with 600 million ounces of silver defined plus lead and zinc. Again, we're looking at this from an underground standpoint. In 2009, SSR put out an underground pre-feasibility study at $11 silver that had significant economics. They permitted an underground mine, which we've already put in a 1.5 kilometer adit right on top of a manto. We're using that adit to drill underground to prove out some of the feeder structures and ensure there's no dissemination of the drill results that was mainly vertical from SSR's standpoint. The plant is already permitted. What we will be working on is a tailings dam permit that's required and how to bring power to site. We can either come off of the local power grid or if we do a self-contained power. But this is what we're going to be working on here for the next quarter and ultimately come out with a plan for 2025 of when we can deliver either a PFS or a feasibility study on an underground operation for Pitarrilla. If you look at the 2009 PFS that SSR published, it produced about 6.5 million ounces of silver plus lead and zinc at 3,000 tons per day. So we think if we can do about 7 million ounces of silver plus lead and zinc, we can get into about 22 to 23 million ounces of silver production plus the lead and zinc, which would put us into that senior silver production basis, all in Mexico. These two mines would be very low cost, some of the lowest cost mining operations in our space. So ultimately, in our peer group, there's not a lot with regards to growth. We have one near growth asset with Terronera, as I say, doubles our production, cuts our cost profile in half, and behind that we have Pitarrilla. We currently have about 250 million shares outstanding, $750 million market cap, significant growth on the horizon, near catalyst, good coverage out of Canada, and as said, a really good balance sheet. We'll have about $120 million of debt on the balance sheet at the end of the build, but Terronera itself will do about $120 million of after-tax cash flow in its first year. So with that, thank you, and I'm not sure if I have much time for questions, but there's about 30 seconds left.
No, I'd say if you have questions, find Dan at the conference. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Tamara.